Hey, so we all tell stories every single day. We share stories and experiences with our family, our friends, our colleagues, and sometimes it can be tricky to connect the events and the things that happen in your stories. So today we are learning 10 very common phrases that you can use to tell any story more naturally in English. And stay tuned until the end of today's lesson because I'll tell you a little story using all of the phrases that we learned today so you can see them in action. Okay, so our first phrase is first of all. First of all. Now, of course, you can use first of all when you are talking about a series of events. So first of all, second of all, and so on. But you can also use first of all in your stories to give some background information that your listener needs to know. So there might be some important details that your listener needs to know before you actually start telling the story. And you can present these details or this background information by saying, first of all. So for example, first of all, I met this guy years ago. First of all, I met this guy years ago. So this is background information, but I'm presenting it with first of all. Or of course, if we are talking about a series of events. For example, so first of all, I woke up at 5 a.m. First of all, I woke up at 5 a.m. Or first of all, it was supposed to be just the two of us. So first of all, it was supposed to be just the two of us. So this could be, again, background information or a series of events. First of all. Okay, the next phrase is so, subject, and verb to be. So, subject, and verb to be. And this one you can use in the past tense or in the present tense. So let me explain. So I am. So he is. So she is. So we are. So they are, and so on. And we can use it in the past tense as well. So I was, so he was, so she was, so we were, and so on and so on. And we use this phrase or this type of phrase to basically set the scene when we are telling a story, to paint a picture of the scene, what was happening for our listener or for our audience, okay? So for example, so I'm at a restaurant and suddenly he walks in. So I'm sitting at a restaurant and suddenly he walks in. So I am painting a picture for you of what happened in my story. I can, as I said, use this phrase in past tense or present tense. So I was sitting in a restaurant and suddenly he walked in. Or present, so I am sitting in a restaurant and suddenly he walks in. It's okay when you're telling a story to use present tenses because you are basically painting a picture for your audience of what was happening in that present moment in your story. So this one can be a little bit tricky, but you're basically trying to transport your audience or your listener into that present moment. Let me give you some more examples. So I was walking down this tiny dark street and, okay, so I was walking down this tiny dark street and then I continue my story. Another example, so I was sitting there with 20 people who I didn't even know. So I was sitting there with 20 people who I didn't even know. Another example, so we were sitting there and his phone starts ringing. So we're sitting there and his phone starts ringing, all right? So this phrase is really, really useful to set the scene and help your listener imagine visually what was happening in your story. All right, next we have subject, was or were, like. So I was like, he was like, she was like, we were like, they were like, you were like, Rob was like, James was like, Maria was like. Okay, so subject, was, were, verb to be in the past tense, and like. And this one actually means someone said something. It's an informal and conversational way of saying that someone said. So instead of I said blah, 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 you can say I was like. Instead of she said blah, 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 you can say she was like. It's very, very conversational and especially common when you're telling stories to friends. So for example, he was like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "My name's Julie." This means he asked me, or he said, "What is your name?" And I said, "My name is Julie," okay? Another example, he was like, "Hi, how's it going?" And I was like, "I'm okay." So it just means he said or she said. You will hear this in television shows, in natural conversations. If you pay attention, you will hear this one. Very, very common. Next, we have subject, go, or subject goes. And it's very similar to the last one. I go, he goes, she goes, we go, they go. And this means the same thing. He said, I said, she said, and so on. So it's actually exactly the same as I was like. So for example, he goes, "What's your name?" And I go, "My name's Julie." Okay. So this is the same as he asked or said, "What's your name?" And I said, "My name's Julie." So let me tell you a few different ways to say that exact same thing, okay? He was like, "Hi." He said, "Hi." He goes, "Hi." All of these have the same meaning, and again, very conversational and natural. So these ones are great for when you are reporting what someone said. So when you're reporting a dialogue or sharing a dialogue or a conversation in your story, these ones are very great to use, all right? So a few more examples. So I'm sitting with my friend and I go, "What do you want to have for lunch?" And she was like, "We can have pizza if you want." And I was like, "Okay, but we had pizza yesterday." So she goes, "Okay, let's have Chinese food instead." All right. Okay, the next phrase is meanwhile, subject, was or were. Meanwhile, subject, was or were. Meanwhile, I was. Meanwhile, we were. Meanwhile, he was, and so on and so on. And this is for when two events are happening at the same time. So for example, I was at work, meanwhile, he was outside waiting for me. So I was working and he was waiting for me simultaneously. So two simultaneous actions. Another example, so we were stuck in traffic, meanwhile, the kids are crying in the back seat. Meanwhile, the kids were crying in the back seat. So we're sitting there stuck in traffic, the first action. The second, simultaneous action, the kids are crying in the back seat of the car. So this one is great for when you have two actions happening at the same time in your story. All right, next thing I know, next thing I know. Next thing I know, this phrase is when you want to jump from one event to another event in your story without explaining all the details in the middle. So you don't want to explain all of the little details about how you got from here to here. You just want to jump from one event to the next. So for example, so we were eating dinner and next thing I know, he's down on one knee proposing. So we were eating dinner, next thing I know, he's down on one knee proposing. So obviously in this example, we were eating dinner and maybe things happened. Maybe we ate our dinner, had a conversation, but I don't want to include all these details. So I'm just gonna jump to another important event. Next thing I know, he's proposing. Another example. So we were planning a small get together and next thing I know, there's 40 people at my place. Next thing I know, there's 40 people at my place. And again, in this example, of course, other events happened leading up to 40 people being in my place, but I don't want to include those little details. I just want to jump from planning to 40 people being in my house. All right, our next phrase is all of a sudden, all of a sudden. And all of a sudden is to talk about something that happened suddenly, of course. So for example, all of a sudden she started crying. All of a sudden she started crying. And this one we can use at the beginning or at the end of a statement. So she started crying all of a sudden. She started crying all of a sudden. Or all of a sudden she started crying. Both of these are okay. Another example, all of a sudden my car broke down. All of a sudden, my car broke down. All of a sudden, the power went out. All of a sudden, the power went out. All right, so this one is great when something happened suddenly in your story. Next is out of the blue, out of the blue. Now, out of the blue is actually an idiom, and we use this one to talk about something that happened unexpectedly, something unexpected that happened in your story. So for example, they showed up at my house out of the blue, or out of the blue, they showed up at my house. So you can use this one again at the beginning or at the end of your statement. Another example, out of the blue, they started fighting, or they started fighting out of the blue. And another example, she broke up with him out of the blue. So this was unexpected. Maybe their relationship seemed to be going well and they broke up unexpectedly, out of the blue. Next up, we have so anyways. So anyways, this little phrase is very useful because you can use it to get back on topic when you forgot what you were saying or you somehow got off topic, or you can use it to conclude or end your story, basically to say what happened in the end. So here are some examples. Let's say I'm in the middle of a story and I lose my train of thought, or we start talking about something else and I want to get back to my story. I can say, so anyways, then I called her back and... Or I can say, so anyways, where was I? So anyways, where was I? This means, where was I in my story? Basically, I forgot what I was saying. Okay, so anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, she called me back and blah, blah, blah. Or if you want to use this to conclude your story, you can say, so anyways, everything worked out. So anyways, everything was fine in the end, okay? So again, so anyways is good when your story's interrupted and you want to get back on topic, or if you're jumping around in your story. Sometimes when we tell stories, we forget details and we say, oh yeah, by the way, and we kind of jump around in time. We talk about something that happened before and something that happened later. And so anyways is really good to get yourself back on track or back on topic, or to conclude and say what happened in the end. And next we have a phrasal verb. The phrasal verb is end up. End up. End up is a very, very common phrasal verb. We use it to talk about plans that changed from our original plans, okay? So for example, we ended up canceling the whole event. We ended up canceling the whole event, all right? So obviously we planned an event, something happened, and in the end, we ended up canceling the whole event. Another example, we just ended up going without him. We ended up going without him. So we planned to go with him, but we ended up going without him. Or I ended up taking the bus. I ended up taking the bus. Maybe I had planned on walking or driving, but I ended up taking the bus. So this one is great because, of course, our plans change all the time, and you can use this one throughout your story when different plans changed or different plans evolved. Okay, so as promised, I will tell you a little story using all 10 of these phrases so you can hear how they fit very nicely and very naturally into a story. Ready? So when I first started teaching, I moved to China. And first of all, my moving to China was totally out of the blue. I got the job online and moved there just a few weeks after I graduated. So once I arrived, I had to do a medical exam to get my visa and get all of my documents sorted, which is normal in most countries. And I was a little bit worried because I didn't speak the language, so I thought I might not be able to understand the doctors. So I talked to my company, I told them I was a little worried, and they go, don't worry, we'll send a translator with you, you'll be fine. And I was like, okay, perfect, no need to worry. So we're at the hospital, the translator comes inside with me and goes up to what looks like a reception desk. She speaks to them and she gets some kind of form. I guess it's a medical form of some sort, but none of this was translated and none of it was in English. So I was just kind of standing there and waiting. And all of a sudden the translator hands me this form and she goes back to sit in the car. So I'm walking around this hospital trying to figure out what to do and where to go. And meanwhile, she's sitting in the car and not translating anything. So I decided to ask for help, and I'm walking around looking for someone to ask for help. And I found a woman sitting behind a glass window with a little hole in the window. So I walk up to this woman and I ask her if she speaks English. She does not, but she saw that I had a document in my hand and she extended her hand. So I reached out to hand her this document through the little hole in the window. And next thing I know, there is a needle in my arm and they're doing a blood test through this little hole in the window. So honestly, I was super shocked and uncomfortable, but I started laughing because it was so strange to me that I just didn't know what to do in that situation. And obviously I couldn't pull my arm out. So the blood test was finished and I walked around the rest of the hospital trying to figure out what to do. And I ended up finishing the medical exam eventually, I think. And that was one of my funny, strange experiences from my first teaching job overseas. So as you can see, these 10 phrases can be easily used in any kind of story, and they're such a great way to connect your ideas and to speak more naturally. So try using these. You can try writing a story if it's difficult for you to just tell one off the top of your head. You can try writing it down and inserting these phrases, or you can try recording yourself speaking. I say this all the time, but try recording yourself telling a story and try to use some of these naturally and see how you do. You don't have to use all 10 of them the way that I did. I did that just to show you that it's possible, but of course you can start off with just a few of them. You can also leave me some examples in the comments. If you have any questions, don't forget to ask those as well. And do not forget to grab your free ebook, English Conversations Made Simple. I'll link it down below for you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you soon in the next one.